Hi, welcome to my Eye to Eye podcast. And today I'm happy to invite my next guest, Dr. Pedro Gonçalves. Dr. Gonçalves has enormous experience in building private practice from the scratch, and I'm very honored to have him as a guest on today's episode. So please enjoy the episode. Dear Pedro, welcome to my podcast. So let's start as a business project. Let's start from the how to prepare the business project or should I call it business project in general, or better to call it private practice? What
Yeah,
do you
it's
think?
first and foremost, dear Tuti, it's a huge pleasure and honor to be your guest in this podcast. I find that it's something that it's really shaking a little bit the podcast world when it comes to several specialities in medicine, and it's great that you actually took the lead in introducing new concepts to the community. Both in the ophthalmology community, which is your background, and among other specialities. I think it's really good. But what I think it's going back to what you said regarding how do we start this project? I like to call it more a project. Let's the business part aside now, but let's call it a project
Yes,
because it's a big project and then it's going to be converted into a business, hopefully. One of the main things that most of us practitioners face at some stage in life is wanting to establish ourselves. And this establishment of ourselves with our own space, being our own boss, is a huge
yes,
it's a huge step. I'm pretty sure you've done that leap into this world.
yes,
Speaking a
yeah,
little bit on what you said, the purpose of this podcast and eventually a series of podcasts on this theme is basically to support all our colleagues that want to do this leap into the
yes,
business world, to open their own private practices, to open their own offices. And this is, I would not say it's the ultimate recipe for success. It's not based just on opinions, it's based on experience, and at the same time it's based on results. And this is
exactly.
why we want to introduce that. We always like to do, and we spoke already before in a private way, myself and yourself, is and taking the metaphor of a recipe of a cook. We can give the recipe to 100 people and probably
Yeah,
99% of them will cook it in a different way. So I would like that the audience take all what we're going to say with a pinch of salt and basically to adapt to their personality, to
yeah,
their
of
ways
course.
of working, to their vision. This is what we're telling is what we did, our experience, and the results that we have. And with
And
these,
also,
no, no, please go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. I also want to point the challenges, because it's not only about like we do that and the success. So it's not, success is not guaranteed at the beginning. So of course there are some mistakes we might do at the beginning and challenges. So I want to talk about that too, because whenever we meet colleagues, mostly they talk, yes, I did like that, and everything seems so successful. Everything is so perfect that you think, oh my God, why me at the beginning is not that perfect, or maybe I'm doing something wrong, and then another things come to your thoughts, and then you start to doubt and everything. So these parts I also would like to mention, not in order that colleagues are not discouraged at the beginning if they face to some challenges during this process.
No, I agree. I agree fully with you. And this is the sad part because everybody only likes to talk about successes but not failures. And I think
Exactly.
failures is a huge part of the journey for success because normally, very rarely, you have success without a failure first because you have not learned enough to
Exactly.
not make the mistake in the next step. One of the things that we underestimate it's planning. And most of us, myself included, many years ago, I thought that planning was way too boring. We want to go to the action immediately. So action going, oh, I want to do these, I want to do that, focusing on the details. This is the dream. And this is, again, picking what we just said on mistakes. This is the big mistake. One of the biggest mistakes is
Yeah.
not planning enough. I would say there's not enough planning. Of course, planning at some stage or in the long run, it can become a little bit of an enemy because we plan too much and we execute little. But we need to find the right balance. It's not just overly
Hmm.
planning things because things will
Yeah.
change, and things are not set in stone. And people think, okay, I planned so well that this is going to go in that direction and in no other direction. No,
Because not
things in
everything depends on us. When we plan something, there is a project and involves many other things and many other people, and so you cannot guarantee that it will
absolutely,
be fulfilled.
absolutely. And at the same time, what I want to people to, if they don't take anything else from this podcast, at least they take this home message, which is plan enough for you to be prepared to a variety of scenarios that you will face
Yeah.
on your journey as an entrepreneur, as a business person, as a practice owner. This is the basic. And so, what we are covering today, we're going to go on the beginnings of this planning. So, what you will do while you're still thinking on actually opening a new private practice. One of the things that we
Hmm.
need to identify ourselves is taking in account that this podcast is addressed to a variety of specialities in medicine, is basically what types of treatments do you want to provide? Because where you wanted to insert yourself in the community, this is actually gonna actually mirror everything else that I'm gonna say afterwards. Because if you want to just offer one single type of treatment, is going to be different than if you want to offer a spectrum of treatments. Because this will influence
Hmm.
space, this will influence the communication you will have, this
Yeah.
influence the headcount, this will influence the investments on materials, this will influence the location, this will influence everything. So I would say that the first thing that should be defined is what type of treatments do you want to provide as a practitioner. My suggestion is don't start to try to provide everything in one go. Try to be good at the basics, really good, because you are creating a statement in a market where a lot of people are not knowing you yet. So
Hmm.
starting offering every single treatment out there is a little bit challenging. And it's challenging, and we're going to get to that because on the marketing messages that your practice is going to have to communicate to their future patients dash customers that will going to visit you,
Yeah.
it's going to be complex because they don't understand so well the positioning where you are. And what we see now these days is all the successful businesses that have come up in the last, I would say, 5 years, maximum a decade, even in healthcare, they have specialized in specific paths. So there are even practices offering
Hmm.
one, two treatments, and that's it. And they are really excel on the customer journey, on the experience that the patients have, on the workflows that they develop internally. They become so good at that that they succeed really well. It's always the same
Would
thing
you
going.
would you advise this for one person, or is it or do you consider also private practice as a group practice? Because, for example, if you are as a one doctor, like a one person, and you opening your private practice, of course, I totally agree that you would consider, okay, I would not offer now many treatment options, just that. But is it also, do you think that it's also applicable for those who wants to open a group practice, like a group doctors, and they decide to open a clinic? Or this is something different?
No, I think it applies to both. I think it applies to both because
Both.
you can go in two directions. You can go on having your own office, your own clinic, your own practice. The word clinic varies from country to country. In some countries,
Hmm.
clinic, it's already implying a huge amount of specialities, while an office implies only a few. So just for us to be clear on the nomenclature. So whenever we are talking
Hmm.
about opening a practice or opening a clinic, in this case, we want to fuse both terms together. So opening a practice dash clinic, it's the same as we are defining it. It's not that a clinic will
Hmm.
have to be implied. You can have a clinic chain or a practice chain. So just for the sake of people to understand exactly what we're
Hmm.
talking about, because these changes from country to country,
Yeah.
the definition of each. So what I would say is if you want to open, let's refer to the clinic now. if you want to open a series of clinics or one or a series of it, you can actually go with multi treatments or almost mono treatments. And what do I mean with that? If you define
Mm-hmm.
something that is really well done, or that you do it in an exceptionally good way, and you develop a team around you that actually performs and executes and follows your directions and leads into execute that service so well, you have two options. Either you introduce new treatments, or you specialize in that treatment and you open new clinics only with that treatment, because you already have created a template. So the template is created, so you just need to replicate it. It's called um, scalability. So one of the most difficult things that we as practitioners find that it's very difficult is to scale our businesses, because we are not businessmen by nature. We
Yeah.
are practitioners. So scalability is something that we are actually finding that it's very difficult. So the people that find that they can replace themselves at the helm of a business, and the business continues to function without that person at the helm, those ones have found out that scalability exists. And as soon as they do this scalability, then what happens is, normally these practices, they tend to replicate, or these clinics tend to replicate, because they found the formula. And as soon as they found the formula, why not replicate the formula? And this is where the most successful businesses happen. It sometimes is not, I want to offer everything in one single place. No, they are good at
Mm-hmm.
something and then they expand. And by replicating the concept, of course, that then we are getting ahead of ourselves. This is going to be topic for another conversations. But then you will have also what increase the expansion in the market. And normally the expansion in that specific market, you can achieve it in two ways. Either you acquire more customers dash patients to visit your practice,
Mm-hmm.
or you try to treat those patients to other types of problems that they have. So basically, you expand the variety of treatments that you offer on each practice. So these are two ways to follow. None of them is right or wrong. Most successful companies in the world, both on healthcare and non-healthcare, have followed these paths. McDonald's started just by selling burgers. Then they eventually start to offer a huge variety of services, right? Sorry for the comparison. It's
Slowly,
nothing to
step
do.
by step.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's a step by step, but they specialized really well in prime locations, and secondly, in offer an exceptional service in a very available locations. So what does this mean? This means that there's no wrong answers. You can start with more treatments, but you can start with one single one, and then you define what you
Mm-hmm.
want to do next. The second one, when you have clear understanding of what types of treatments you would like to provide, the step number two, in my opinion, is to define your target audience. The target audience is
Mm-hmm.
very important, because if you want to provide a treatment that the target audience is mainly driven to older people, you're not going to open a practice on a neighborhood or in a place where mostly the younger people go, because then you're completely off track. Correct? So one is
Yeah.
actually influencing directly the other. So more likely, there's a lot of different things. So on the ophthalmology industry, refractive surgery, just as an example, normally is indicated to a lower end of age of the population. So as soon as you know the treatments, and now you understand also why it's so important to define the treatments first, because if you don't know what the treatments are that you want to offer, the next questions will be difficult to answer.
Do you think that it's also applicable for those who just wants to open private practice as a general, for example, ophthalmologist or general practitioner, where you don't have this specific treatment approach which you offer, for example, like a LASIK surgeries or cataract surgeries, in case if you open the clinic, of course, because this is like a bit bigger than private practice. But do you think the one who wants to open a private practice and basically wants to attract all kind of patients, I mean, any age range. Uh, this also should be considered.
I would say yes, and the reason, and I'll give you a clear example. Imagine that you are inserted in a
Okay.
community offering general
Mm-hmm.
services, but these people are used to, or the majority of people have availability and are used to go to the public service. So basically, the target
Okay.
group includes also private patients versus public patients. So if you want to open a practice that is a
Yes.
general practice and you want to target for private
Mm-hmm.
patients, but the public patients have a huge offer of services and they are not used to pay for those types of services that you want to provide, then I think you shouldn't consider that location, because you need to do one of the most difficult things in the world, which change the culture and the needs of those specific patients, because their mindset is focused. Why am I going to pay to Dr. X when I can have this service in my hospital for free? At this point, I don't give it a huge relevance on the planning, on the initial steps, because the target population, when I mean with that, is first, if you want to compete with public versus private practices, or if you want to compete versus public and other private practices, or exclusively only against other private practices. So this is one thing. The second thing is the type of population that you want to address. Older people, you want to have a huge variety of you want to have all the population. It's also important to define the location of the practice, the differentiators that you're going to have compared with public versus other private competition. This is a second question that is going to be placed afterwards, because this is going to go into your
Mm-hmm.
messaging. It's going to go into how you're going to position yourself, your office in that specific community, and what type of communication you want to address into that. And also at the same time, it's going to impact the workflows that you want to improve, because if, for instance, if accessibility to treatment is something that you want to define yourself for, then you need to say, okay, all the practices are only opening in the morning. This is just an example. So what I will do is I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to open
Mm-hmm.
in the morning and in the afternoon, because everybody that is in the afternoon that wants an appointment, they will get access to it in my own office. Same thing goes on weekends, having
Yeah.
somebody on call, increase your head counts, So this is impacts the whole story. So what I would do is start with the basics. Step number one, define the treatments that you want to provide. Step number two, the target audience. Very important, because this will impact the location where you want to open your business. This is very, very important.
Mm-hmm.
All follow all these indications that we have been discussing this last few minutes. The third thing that I would consider, because this will impact your finances, it will impact your cash flows, it will impact everything, is define the minimum headcount, or the minimum people that you need working with you
Yeah.
in order for the business to be successful. Because we cannot do everything. It's impossible. And we don't want to do everything, because what we want to do is want to do what we are good at. But everybody has their own subset of skills, and we should leverage that in our favor. One of the maximum mottos
Mm-hmm.
that we have is surround yourself with people that are even smarter than you. And there's one expression that usually say, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So normally what I
Yeah.
would say is try to learn from people that can help you. There are a lot of people out there that have huge experiences, and they have subset of skills that we don't have. And this is very important.
I totally agree that it's good to have someone you trust, but it's also important, I think, for every doctor who wants to start his own private practice to understand everything: management, planning, even finances, everything. So, what do you think about that?
I think what you're saying is excellent, but I'm going to challenge you on what you just said, which basically,
Okay.
which that I like to challenge, because I like to challenge myself every single day, the same way I like to challenge others, because I always believe that there are several parts of the same truth. I'm going to give you an example. The best
Mm-hmm.
CEOs in the world, they don't know the whole business. They understand the business, but when they look at all their collaborators, they cannot execute, most of them, they cannot execute all their jobs in a better way than their collaborators. Why? Because they came from a specific path. And you are going to be your own CEO. You're going to be your CEO of your own place. Doesn't matter if you have one collaborator or if you have 100 or 200. It's the same thing. You're your own boss. You're your own CEO. And the definition of a
Yeah.
CEO is a person that knows how to manage people the best and understands the business. So when you say
Hmm.
to me, do it's we can fall into the micromanagement type of mentality because we want to control every single thing that everybody wants to do. I think it's a common mistake. But most of the biggest CEOs I've ever met, and I've met quite a few in the industry, they very rarely are micromanagers. Being a micromanager is a little bit of an enemy of that nirvana of management skills, so to say. What I would suggest from my experience and what I have seen in the past is you need to understand every step, but you don't need to master
Yes.
it. You understand it, but
Yes, exactly. This
understanding.
is what exactly I mean to understand. You don't have to go too deep and do everything. And of course, it's at some point it's also irritating for others who works for you and wants the best for you. Basically, when you just stand over the head and control them, there's not. I don't mean that part. I meant mainly understanding that you're not a
Absolutely
plain just a
understanding.
plain paper and thinking, oh, I have no clue. Yeah, you do that. No, it's good to have a clue, I think.
Exactly. I would not say go into the details. Of course, depends on the personality. There are some that want to go into
Hmm.
the details. There are some that wants to become on an helicopter view of the business per se. And okay, I know that for customer acquisition we need A, B, and C. The details of how to
Yeah.
do it, I will have somebody that is going to support me in doing that. But I know that these steps need to be executed. But I know the details of it. Of course, if you want to become, I don't know. I'm not gonna say on getting to the next level, but if you have enough time to spare, or is a curiosity that you wanna go into depthness into one specific topic, please go ahead. But it's not mandatory that you know how to do everything. If you want to be focused more on the management side, then yes. But if you want to run a practice, and now we are getting way ahead of ourselves, which is, do you want to become the practitioner of the practice or you want to be the manager of the practice? Because these are two
But
different
at the
questions.
beginning, as a solo person, for example, because I know also many colleagues who just open their practice from the scratch,
Mhm.
one doctor, and they don't even hire secretary at the beginning because they just do everything themselves, and it's totally understandable, or someone from the family helps them. So I think in this stage especially, you really have to know yourself everything, because no one knows how long you're going to stay like that. Maybe 1 month, because they open their practice additionally to the hospital. This is just the ugly truth how we all do that. We work in a hospital and we open private practice. We are mainly in a hospital and we are 1-2 days in a private practice in a week. And at the
Absolutely.
beginning, we will have to understand everything, also management, the taxation, the papers. So this management, which later can be like a helicopter management, at the beginning has to start basically from the micromanagement control. So
I agree with everything that you have said, but then what the remark you just did for me goes back to planning.
yes.
Was it the best plan then to be opening something just by yourself? It's a challenge. I'm
Hmm.
not saying that it's right or wrong. It's something. Was it the best decision that that specific person has taken? So basically,
Hmm.
if you are ready in a community where you want to have an impact and you want to differentiate yourself, and suddenly your competitors are very well established practices where they can offer accessibility, they offer phone service 24/7, they offer online bookings, they offer everything, and you are one single person. How can you compete with that? Because the moment that you are
Hmm.
doing consultations, you cannot answer to queries to your office. You are not focusing on developing a marketing message. So this is the things. Of course, there's no right and wrong. There's a lot of very successful people that started from like that. They started literally from the ground up, from zero to an empire. And
Mm-hmm.
and they did it like that. So they started it in single person business, then they scale it up to two people, some family and friends support in the meantime on how to grow that business. It's also good, but ultimately it goes back to the first question: is what do you want to do? What do you want to offer? This is the first question. Because, for instance, if you are opening and thinking of opening a private practice that are only offering consultations but not services as an executionable thing per se, then probably the likelihood that you'll succeed is, if there's not a lot of competition in the area, it's probably quite high. But if you want to offer other services, you cannot be doing everything by yourself, or even with just one single other person. That's why it's very
Yes,
important.
of course.
Define the
Yeah.
type of treatments, define the target audience, define the minimal ad count. If your minimum ad count, after you answer step one and step two, when you get to step three of the minimum ad count, you say, okay, I just need myself, and
Yeah.
eventually, I don't know, somebody, friends and family can support me in the interim time for a few months or even a year, or eventually friends and family plus an assistant or plus a nurse or plus somebody supporting me on the communications, something like that. Also, the good thing is sometimes, and this depends on the countries that we are talking to, it's quite challenging to hire people. Challenging either
Yeah.
because there's not enough people to hire with the skills that you're looking for, or secondly, because if you are actually not 100% sure of the person you're hired, then it's very difficult to get rid of that specific person. So you always
Mm-hmm.
evaluate very carefully on, is this the right person? Am I going to commit a big mistake? So this
Yeah.
is something that it's also very, very important. So that's why minimum F counts is important. And for the people that don't feel so comfortable in hiring people in the beginning, because it includes costs, it includes a lot of responsibility, it includes a lot of other things, they outsource these services to third party companies. For instance, picking up their phones, they don't hire an assistant to pick up their phones. There's a company that everybody that wants, they have access to your bookings for your schedules, so they actually book the appointments for you. So that person is not on your headcount. So if your business, you want to change it to something else, or you don't want to have that specific person on your books, basically just outsource that specific function, and somebody's going to be 24/7 working for you, even though you can end the contract at any time. So these will
Yeah.
not give you these, it gives you this flexibility. Eventually it probably costs you a little bit more, but sometimes for scalability purposes it's cheaper and it's easier, because you just contract a company that will provide that service for you. And this is just an example. You
Hiring
can either
digital secretary.
you can have a digital secretary. So basically, you could have a system that actually does everything digitally for you, or you can
Mm-hmm.
even actually hire the services of a call center. A call center is not just for big
Mm-hmm.
companies. There are call centers that are specialized in small businesses, where basically you give them a sheet of questions, where basically they are educated on, they are trained on, and then everybody that calls your practice, the number is redirected to the call center, and the call
Yeah.
center answers your questions of your practice while you are working. So basically, you don't need to go and stop your consultation or your treatment and go outside to the reception to pick up the phone or doing any of that. Somebody's taking care of all of that for you, and you're just
Mm-hmm.
focusing on yourself and the people that are in the practice in receiving the patients and provide the best customer experience possible. So this is also an option. But again, now we are going a little bit left and right, but things for people to consider. And it's a
Mm-hmm.
great observation from your end on things to consider. So what
Yeah.
I would say is, as soon as you defined what type of treatments, what type of target, what type of F count, I'm assuming that in the very beginning you also know what budget do you want to put into your business. So this is
Mm-hmm.
probably the initial part. I want to put X money into this business. This is the fundamental question: is, do you want to go with your own private money? Is it a lot or is it a little? Because the question about money is going to be answered when you have your theoretical business plan defined. Then you need to
Mm-hmm.
know how much money you will need to execute that. And at that
Yeah.
stage, there's two things you're going to answer yourself. First question is, am I being too conservative or too aggressive in my idea? Because this is going to require quite a lot of money, much more money than I thought. So what you do
Hmm.
at that stage is I need either to cut or I need to do it differently. And this is something that I would like to touch in a few next points, because I think the money question, when you have X amount of money, all the other exercise that we have been doing up to now has cost you zero. It has cost you zero investment, meaning
Just an
that
effort and
it's just
thoughts.
an effort. It's just your time. Of course, time is
Yeah,
money, and of course, your time is the ultimate gift. It's the ultimate asset. You cannot buy time. You cannot recover time. It's something that is the most precious asset in the world. But this is the
yeah,
only asset that up to now you will invest, is your own time. Money wise, you're still gonna have the same money that you have at the end of this exercise that you had in the beginning. So that's why I didn't talk money in the beginning. So
yeah.
I want to recap for everybody to understand. First is type of treatments. This is a mental exercise. This is an exercise to yourself to know if you can do it, what resources you need, and in which time frame you can implement it. So, step
Hmm.
number one, what type of treatments you want to do? Step number two, what is your target audience? Because the target audience will influence the location where you want to open your business. Step number three, what is the minimum head count in your mind that you need to execute what you wanted to do? It doesn't mean
Yeah,
if it's conservative or if it's aggressive. It doesn't matter. It's a theoretical exercise. Put the minimum amount of people that you need. Number four, measure the competition. And what I did about measuring the competition is how many number of similar practices to yours are in your region. Is it one? Is it 10? Is it 100? Are you competing just with the private sector or with also the public sector? Or you're competing purely with the public sector? So this is also something that you need to take in consideration. How are you going to measure? There's before was quite challenging, I would say, but in this digital world is probably the easiest thing you can possibly do. Just go on Google Maps, and this is a super easy way to do it,
yeah.
and put your private practice, and you get a list on the radius of what you think it should be a good location. Because before you thought about the location, now you're going to measure it. If what you want with the measuring of the competition is a validation of if the target audience and the location that you've chosen is the right one. Because if there's
Hmm.
already 1,000 practices doing exactly the same thing you want, I'm not saying that it's a bad idea to you to go, but you really need to put an extra spice on your business to differentiate from everybody else. And it's much easier
Hmm.
to differentiate when you have one competitor or two than having 1,000. Of course, then the population question gets in. If there's 1 million people in where the 100 practices or the 1,000 practices are, it's one question. But if there's only, I don't know, 100,000 people, then the question is completely different, right? So measuring the competition is very important. And I want to
Yeah,
remind everybody, this is an exercise. It's not, you have not signed anything, you have not executed anything. You're just doing your planning, 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 planning. This is the important part. So the other thing that is what I would say it's the step number five is define all the tools, instruments, building works you need. So define a huge list of all
hmm,
these things and put a number. Even if you don't know how much really it costs, put at least a number on how much money you think it costs. Then you will validate your assumption later on. But again, this is just for you to give you an idea. What I would suggest to everybody is don't be conservative when you're attributing a value to something, because from my experience, very rarely thing goes according to plan when it comes to value of instruments, building works, locations, rents. There's always some fee that you're not counting on. Go, go,
absolutely.
go. I would not say go wild, but go a little bit more than what you think it is. It's better to be at the top
Hmm.
and then have a nice surprise than being on the
Yeah,
conservative side, and then it's 20-30% more, or even in some cases 100% more. We have all seen in these contracts of big organizations that very rarely they manage to stay on budget, and they have teams just defined to do budgeting, and even them fail. So imagine ourselves that don't have so much experience on budget, most likely we will fail. So
So you
try to,
had failed practices as well in your experience.
yes, we had something that I'm going to give you a quick example.
Mm-hmm.
We have budget for everything in a practice that we had, but then we forgot to a simple basic beginner's mistake. We forgot to block the money for the lease. So basically, it was we got a lease contract signed for 5 years, but actually you need a guarantee, and the guarantee for that lease for those 5 years was X amount of money. And that X amount of money, you needed that money in the very beginning of the project in order to start the
It was
project.
deducted.
Right? And we
It,
didn't put it, and this was many years ago, but this is for you to see such a basic mistake. So we went
yeah,
into complexities of, oh, we need to do these building works, the whole thing. This was in the early stages, but I think at that time we're already doing a comprehensive exercise. But we forgot that it was in an expensive location on top of it, so the rent was high. So that means that the slice of guaranteeing the lease for the next 5 years of our contract was quite a big chunk of money. And this money we
yeah,
completely forgot. And then when we got at the very end almost, we thought, okay, now we have a little bit of an issue where we're going to find this money, because we didn't budget for it. And now we need to find this money because all the other processes were already moving. So, and we didn't found it out just on the exercise. We found it out on the execution side, which is much more serious. So this is why
yeah,
it's always very important. And I'm assuming that even now, where the lists of all these things are much more comprehensive, the legislation changes as well. So basically, there's a license that probably you didn't thought of, or you didn't even knew that existed, that it's going to be mandatory that you have it in your office in order for you to be able to operate. So there are always these
yeah.
kinds of things that are coming. But again, but planning, I'm not saying that it's the ultimate tool or the ultimate resolution, but planning, it's something that most of us neglect on doing, because
Mm-hmm.
we have been educated to plan in a certain direction, but not in a comprehensive way.
I totally agree that planning is important, but it's also important to be flexible, I think, and to change the strategy whenever it's needed. If you get some kind of unexpected changes in your life or in the planning, then you have to really be very flexible and learn and be fast in changing the strategy or changing a bit other direction. So yeah, this is
No,
my
I
opinion about that.
No, I agree. I agree. Adaptation, everybody's going to make mistakes. The successful people are the ones that correct them the fastest. So it doesn't mind making mistakes as long as you are willing to correct them as fast as possible. So the
Yeah.
worst thing is to recognize a mistake and not doing anything about it. What I would like to recap a little bit our conversation, because we have talked about 5 steps that I find that are the minimum
Mm-hmm.
steps that every single colleague should go through this exercise in order to arrive to a possible decision. And this decision sometimes is, I want to open a business, or I really don't want to open the business because I'm not ready yet to open the business. So step number
Yeah.
1, define the type of treatments. Step number 2, the target audience and the location. Step number 3, minimum F count needed for you to execute your project. You don't need to go with a lot of people. Just go with what you think is the minimum. Number 4,
Mm-hmm.
define all the instruments, tools, services that you need in order to implement your business, because these will impact how much money you need. And now the step number 6 is actually putting all those 5 in a spreadsheet. And I'm definitely not the most biggest fan of Excel. There are other people that are. I'm not the biggest fan, even though I think it's the most
Okay.
amazing tool. It's the most amazing tool
Why?
that people can work with. My brain is not wired so well for Excel, even though I know how to use it. But for some reason, I don't know, we are not wired the same way for everything. And in
Okay.
my weakness is an Excel file. So
Okay.
what I say is put all that in an Excel file or in another spreadsheet that you want to use, and put all these calculations together. So put how many, in an hypothetical way, how many costs you will have,
Mm-hmm.
put how many costs will have related with the step number 5 and with the step number 4, meaning accounts and the tools and building works you need. And then from those amounts of money, build yourself the business plan. And the business plan is not just numbers. The business plan is what you want to get, what is your vision for the future, what is your main mission that you want to go with your business, what are your mitigating factors in case something goes wrong, what can you do in order to improve, what is where the location of your treat of your practice should be, how many people you should have, the target audience, and where you want to develop your practice. Do you want to just maintain with that target group, or you want to increase your offer to other target groups? So when you have all this information and you analyze this information, I think we should take a bit of time to reflect on what we have, because most of the times you are not 100% prepared for the information that you got there, because you thought about a lot of things, but you didn't thought about,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so if my costs are going to be X at the end of each month, and I'm talking about fixed costs, be it lease, rent, loan interests, salaries, cost of materials,
Taxes.
taxes, all these kinds of things. And you say, okay, so for this to be successful and for me to at least have a break even, I need that my consultations cost X, and I need to provide X amount of consultations per month. So, quick
Mm-hmm.
example, you get at the end of these and you're thinking, okay, in my region, I'm just going to give an example for sake of clarity. I'm charging for round numbers 100 euros on my consultation. So my
Mm-hmm.
costs are X. So my costs are 10,000 a month or 100,000 a month. It doesn't matter. How many consultations do I need to provide in order just to break even? I'm not even talking for you to take your salary home at the end of all those costs, just to break even. These will answer immediately quite a lot of questions, because if you need to provide, let us say, 1,000 consultations a month or 100 consultations a month, it's a completely different outcome. And you need to think about, okay, I can provide 1,000 consultations a month, but I don't have any patients. So how I'm going to
Yeah.
acquire these patients to provide 1,000 consultations a month? And these will give you immediately the level of comfort that you want to get. It gives you the comfort to say, maybe what I have planned is too much for me at this stage, or it's too little.
Mm-hmm.
Because you already have some people already have, sometimes from their other places of work, a pool of patients, be it either on the public side or on the private side. And what they can think about is, okay, I can get 20 patients or 30 patients to come to my private practice a month, but I still need 70 more to break even. How will I acquire those 70? Do I feel comfortable in knowing that these next 70 will be easy to acquire? Or do I need to still invest more money in communications, in marketing, in all of it, in publicity, in order to acquire those customers, dash patients? So these puts you immediately on the planning stage, if that is a good plan or not, or if it's a plan that you feel comfortable in executing or not. So one
But
of
it's
the
also sometimes about the time, no? And how to overcome this time and how to predict this time that, okay, this month I had this amount and in 2 months I'm going to have more, hopefully, for example. Do you think there is some predictability index when you can say, okay, I need this specific time
you know
in average?
planning is good, but of course, forecasting, which is basically what you're telling me, is how can you forecast
Yes.
the rate of increase? This is a very
Yeah.
challenging and difficult exercise. It's very difficult to know to forecast a right number in the beginning. So my recommendation and advice is be conservative on forecasts, because most of the people that have executed brilliantly well everything, all these 5 steps that we have talked about until you get to the business plan, when they got to the forecasting, they screwed it
Mm-hmm.
up. And they screwed it up because they were too aggressive. They were too optimistic. It's not that I'm an optimistic or a negativistic person. I just try to be conservative. But when you have set an organization and the forecast of your patients is not matching the level of engagement that you have committed yourself to, this is a little bit of a problem, because you cannot downgrade what you have done in a very fast way. So this
Yes.
leads it to a more challenging situation that most people don't want to be in, because I know a lot of people that embarked in that journey and didn't plan well, and suddenly
Mm-hmm.
uh, they faced themselves in a situation where they had to cut costs, where they had to let people go, where they had to put extra amount of pressure in their collaborators to generate business. And honestly,
Mm-hmm.
this was not even the initial planning, and the initial planning was not that one, but simply the forecasting was wrong. And they of course, sometimes even if you forecast really well, there are external factors that can impact your business: personnel, taxes.
Mm-hmm.
List is endless. There's a lot of
Yeah,
everything that you can remember of, because you will still gonna forget something that it's not there. So
of
be
course.
conservative on everything else, but be aggressive on the costs, because they're gonna be more than what you think they are. So when you have
Yeah.
all this information, build the business plan. If you never built a business plan before, there's endless amounts of templates online where you can get inspiration from, and you start to build it bit by bit. And then you can even add things yourself, because ultimately a business plan is not something that it's set in stone. There are most varied amounts of business plans that I saw in my life: more complete, more comprehensive, less comprehensive. Start with something that it's not
I'm very
super.
individual as well.
Sorry.
Very
it,
individual as well. So
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree fully with
yeah.
you. An individual business plan that is tailored for you. You can find templates online, and then you fill it up. And I think you are ready for the next step. And the next step is something that I eventually would like to cover, which has to do with the the location and the target audience, meaning that the location specifics, minimum space and future objectives, asking for tenders, terms of negotiation, initial marketing activities while you're still on the initial stages. These could be things that we could develop in the future. We're open for other themes, and there are so many things to discuss, but it leads us to that into that direction.
Perfect. I think we covered perfectly how to start a private practice, really.
The themes about running a practice, starting a practice, what to do at certain steps when the practice is open, it's an endless topic. It's something that it's evolving every day, and I'm very fortunate to be have been invited by you, and for you to receiving me on your podcast, where so many
The
important
honor is
people
all
have been
mine. Yeah.
already. And I hopefully talk to you soon again.